Okay, so Conrad, so I've got to say, I've got tickets for the Belfast show you guys are doing.
Oh, cool.
I actually think I'm probably one of the first five people to buy the tickets. But
Awesome.
but the next time you're speaking to Bruce, could you tell him that it's Belfast and not Belfast?
Sure.
Recently, just last night on Raw, there was an accident where Brie Bella kicked Liv Morgan in the face. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and the way the fans have reacted to that, you'd think that this is the first time any wrestler has ever botched any time. So basically, my question to that is: do you think that wrestling fans are annoying?
Well, I mean, listen, there are annoying fans everywhere, but no, I don't think in this case that anyone's necessarily annoying. I think, wrestling fans are trying to speak their mind, which is the reason social media exists. And, it's probably best for some people to just totally ignore it and pay it no mind. Obviously, those people who were in the ring and the agents, they know what happened. And, what the fans think happened and then what really happened are sometimes two totally different things. And everyone's entitled to their opinion. And that's one of the great things about social media is it gives everyone a voice and their opportunity to sort of speak their mind. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's true.
Yeah, and my whole thing is that I find fascinating about it is if you look at some people's Twitter feeds, they want Brie Bella to be suspended, yet Owen Hart put in the Hall of Fame. And it's like both people have had really bad, well, not equal to the same level, but they've both had botches that are pretty crazy, you know?
It's hard for me to comment on a botch. I don't think it's really my place to talk about a botch. I don't know exactly what the plan was. I don't know who messed up where or why. So I'm not really comfortable saying what someone should have done.
Yeah.
I do know that it's never anyone's intention to intentionally hurt someone. I don't think that was Owen's intent. I certainly don't think that was any of the Bella's intent. I don't think in 2018 anybody's going out there willfully trying to hurt someone.
Are you able to still watch wrestling and actually enjoy it? Or do you always watch the show and think that could be for Bischoff or this could be for Shivani or Bruce?
No, yeah, I definitely enjoy it. It's hard for me to say that I don't enjoy it. But I'm like everybody else. I probably find, something in there to enjoy. I don't think every segment of every show is for me, but I can find something that I enjoy in every show. So, yeah, I still watch the shows and have a good time.
I've actually started watching early 1999 Thunders, and I don't know if it's just because I'm a nostalgia junkie, but I'm loving it.
That's awesome, man. Thank you.
Tell me about, can you actually listen to other wrestling podcasts and enjoy them?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't miss Jim Cornette's podcast. I love his drive-through. I think the experience is great too, but Corny's drive-through is one of the best shows that I don't think nobody really talks about as much as they should. And, of course, I try to catch Jericho whenever he's got a guest on there that I find interesting. I think Colt Cabana is still the godfather of podcasting, and I very much enjoy his show. And, of course, I love JR's podcast, and he's got a great take and some interesting guests. And Stone Cold Steve Austin will have a sleeper episode, and he's starting to interview some folks who maybe, don't normally get the quote-unquote shine, like Joey Janela, him having an opportunity to be on Stone Cold's podcast, I thought was awesome. And MJF was on there. And, when those guys, a guy at Austin's level, is really talking to really an upstart who hasn't been on a ton of national TV yet, that gets them a lot of exposure, and I think it's great for their careers. And obviously it's good for Stone Cold, too, because it gives him exposure to a different set of eyeballs as well. And, I will seek out those shows for sure.
It's funny you mention that because it's Steve Austin's show that I think he's the greatest of all time, but his show sometimes it's a bit of a chore in that it's like he's got four go-to stories where you could ask him anything, Conrad. You could say, so Steve, what's your favourite sandwich? And he'd be like, well, I knew when Owen dropped me on my head, I was going through some problems.
Well, I mean, there's something for everybody about podcasting. That's what's great about it is there's so many choices. It feels like there's hundreds of wrestling podcasts, and there may be, there may not be, but it certainly feels like it. So I think you could listen to a couple of different podcasts every single day and not run out. That's what's great about being a fan right now.
Yeah, that's why I love the Conan and Disco podcast. Like their chemistry is insane.
Yeah, those guys are super entertaining, and again, I think that's a show that maybe doesn't have enough people talking. I don't think you have to be, a all time great like a Stone Cold Steve Austin in order to have a fun podcast. You could be Tony Schiavone or Disco Inferno or anywhere in between and still have an entertaining show. And Disco and Conan have quietly had, a really, really great run on Westwood. And of course, Conan's really one of the OGs of podcasting going back to the early days of MLW. And I'm glad to see that, he's got his fingers everywhere now, whether it's, promotions in Mexico or here in the States or MLW or the podcast. I mean, he's all over the place, and he should be.
And, Disco Inferno's put me on his list.
What list is that?
The list that Disco reads out at the end of every show?
Oh, yeah.
I'm on that list. He doesn't like me. So.
Well, good deal. Glad to hear it.
But the thing with but I think that's why people like you so much, Conrad, as a podcast, is because people can actually relate to you.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
You're probably the most polite person I've ever spoken to, Conrad.
Well, that's very nice of you to say. I appreciate that.
Because over here in Ireland, everybody's, saying the F word and dropping the C word, and then you actually say, you're the first person that's actually ever called me sir.
Well, that's weird, but that's not the case here in Alabama. That's just what we do. Standard operating procedure.
I'm coming to Alabama then.
There you go.
I gotta ask you this though, Conrad. The way they say you're either you're Elvis or you're Frank Sinatra or you're a Beatles or you're Rolling Stones. Are you a DX or an NWO?
Oh, NWO all day. I think DX was great when it was just Hunter and Sean and maybe slide in China and Rick Rude. But by the time the New Age Outlaws and DX were there, it wasn't the same to me. I really enjoyed the swagger that Shawn Michaels brought to the show in 1997, specifically in the first quarter of 98. I think you could take his summer of 97 through March of 98 and put it up against almost anybody in the history of the business. That's the version of DX that I prefer the most, but without question, the NWO were the game changers, and the way they sort of ran roughshod over everybody and everything through 96 and 97. I mean, it created my most favorite year in wrestling. So I'm an NWO guy.
But would you say that, because a lot of people say that the NWO got ruined due to the fact that so many members get added, but in a way, I think that DX could stale really fast because it just stayed the same core group for so long.
Well, listen, it's hard for me to say, how should it have ended? That's what I always sort of come back to. Is I think that the Four Horsemen could have been a stronger group and had an even bigger legacy had it ended sooner. But a lot of people don't share that opinion, and instead they talk about how the NWO should have finished sooner. Well, I think you could argue that, the time to wrap it up is while it's still on top, while it's still hot. But at the same time, from a business standpoint, why would you sort of kill the golden goose? I mean, from a cool standpoint, you want it to finish while it's still cool. But, from a revenue standpoint, you want to get all the money out of it you can. And when you've got the hottest selling shirt in the history of wrestling, I don't know why you would stop promoting it and do something different. Let's keep the money rolling in. So I understand why the Four Horsemen stuck around and why DX was brought back, in the late 2000s. And I understand why the NWO split off and had so many different incarnations. If they bought it with white, maybe they'll buy it with red. I mean, and some of that, as much as we want to make fun of it, was successful.
But would you like to know an interesting story that I met Shawn Michaels earlier this year at an autograph thing, and he told me to my face with witnesses of what the original plans for the NWO were in WWE, I should say. And he told me that because I've always been fascinated about the 2002 era because it just seemed to end. Well, it ended so abruptly. He told me that the plan was to have a NWO versus Triple H feud to go into Survivor Series, which would then somehow lead to Shawn Michaels' return at WrestleMania.
Absolutely.
So Conrad, you said that '97 was your favorite era, but I'm gonna go with for me it was '98 because that's the time when WCW, WWE, and ECW I thought were all just putting out really A-list, well not A-list, but pretty good TV before it all seemed to sort of go off a cliff in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I think '99 was a different year. I didn't enjoy '99 as much anywhere. If I had to pick a favorite promotion in '99, it would be ECW. But I loved all three promotions in '97 and '98. And for that matter, '96. I think you take, maybe the late summer '96 forward through the end of '97, and maybe you keep it going and you say maybe through the summer of '98. But I think by the time you get to like Hog Wild '98 and SummerSlam '98, the ship sort of sailed for me. I didn't enjoy it as much. I know a lot of people sort of hang their hat on Survivor Series '98, but that was not that important of a show to me. And I know it was a crowning moment for The Rock, but for my money, it started to sour a little bit after Goldberg won the world title, after he beat Hogan, and you finished the Brawl for All, and you did the whole DX spoofing the nation. By the time we get to the next month in August, it's not the same to me. So I guess I would say maybe July of '96 on through July of '98. Those 2 years, that's the peak of my fandom for sure.
Well, I've been a mark since '91, but it's dipped and peaked. But the '90s to me was the greatest era.
Oh, for sure. I don't think anybody will dispute that. My second favorite year is 1989, and it's just what I first fell in love with, and I think we all sort of go back to that. And my buddy Brian Rogers has a theory that everybody gets 10 years, and that first 10 years is what they really enjoy the most and always sort of gravitate to. And it's probably not just with wrestling; it's with music and movies and everything.
Well, the best film of all time is American Pie 3, so that was 2003.
Wow, I think you've got to get out more often.
I know this because American Pie 4 is out. So when you're researching for a show with Bruce, do you pretty much go into it knowing what he's going to say, or do you know what he's going to respond with?
Some of the topics for sure, just because we've covered them before or a variation of it. So yeah, I have a general idea sometimes of which way he's going to lean on something, whether he would be for it or against it, just as you would with any of your friends. If you have regular conversation with them, you probably have an idea how they're going to come down on a certain issue, and that's certainly the case with me.
I think one of the things about what really made your show, as a fan's perspective, is that the fact that Bruce is, not that he talks shit about everyone, but he's not really, he doesn't kiss everybody's arse. And that he, even with Steve Austin, he wasn't really afraid to say, sometimes Steve could be a bit of, awkward backstage.
Yeah, no, Bruce will tell it like it is. And I think that's what makes, the podcast so fun is you get some insight that, you maybe didn't expect.
How many stories have you heard about Steve Austin behind the scenes leading up to WrestleMania 18?
None.
None?
No.
Oh, well, one of the big one I've heard is that the original plan was for Steve Austin as a heel to drop the title to a babyface Triple H, but he just flat out refused.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll discuss that at some point with Bruce.
Yeah, I can't wait for that episode. It's again, my big problem with wrestling fans is I think they kind of talk out of their arses, and they're already talking about WrestleMania 35 matches. And what's your take on the rumor, which I'm not believing, that they're going for Roman Reigns versus The Rock?
No, I haven't heard that. I don't think that's very likely either. But to me, the real main event of WrestleMania 35 is Ronda Rousey and Charlotte Flair, and that's what I would close the show with.
Yeah, I would see that happening. Because the thing with The Rock, if you're making $120 million a year, you're not going to say, you know what I should do? I should risk really serious injury for way less money so that I can't earn anymore.
Well, in fairness, I don't know that it is way less money. The WWE is worth more money than ever before with Roman Reigns as their top guy. Vince McMahon has a company now worth probably in excess of $8 billion. And if they wanted to pay The Rock $100 million for that show, not that they would, but they could. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that they would do a big payday, and that they would try to do it to structure some sort of a big payoff with another television rights deal or some sort of a content deal or some sort of licensing. But to say that Vince, wouldn't pony up the money, I don't think is accurate. He's got the money to spend millions of dollars on Brock Lesnar. He's got it to spend on The Rock as well.
Have you heard also the rumor that's now going about that they're moving forward with AJ Styles versus Shawn Michaels?
No, I mean, I know that's a dream match that a lot of people would like to see, and I know the rumors out there that Shawn may be putting his toe back in the water for the Crown Jewel show, so that'll be interesting to see if that actually comes to fruition. And I think if people really want to see an AJ Styles Shawn Michaels match, WrestleMania is probably the only place it would happen.
Definitely. And if it doesn't happen, I'm also predicting AJ Styles versus Daniel Bryan and Rey Mysterio in a three-way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would get a lot of attention for sure. I'm excited to see what they do with Daniel Bryan, and with Rey coming back in, he adds a whole other element to what they're doing right now. And Rey's probably in the best shape that we've seen him in a long time. I mean, he's totally changed his diet and his exercise routine. And I saw him at Starrcast, and he looks like he's ready to, be a main event anywhere in the world, anytime.
Yeah, and I think it's weird how Rey Mysterio keeps getting left off the all-time greatest list. But just as you mentioned Starrcast, and I know you've said many times that you're not going to do a second one and that it was so much work and all that. But if you were going to do another one, what would be the chances of it being like an international one? Or would that just add so much to the work schedule?
Starrcast existed because of All In, and All In is done. There isn't an All In. So I don't know that there will be another Starrcast, but if there were, it would be in conjunction with some sort of sequel to All In, which doesn't seem likely. I mean, I don't know that they'll ever be able to recreate the magic that night, but if they try to, I would be up for that. At least in my mind, Starrcast is a Cody and Conrad thing. If Cody's running a big show, I'd love to be the convention partner. But if it's in England, well, that makes things a lot more expensive and more complicated. And, I'm a mortgage dude. I'm probably out of my element there.
And at least in Ireland, everyone can get a lot more drunker, a lot more fast.
Well, there's that.
Do you drink?
Yeah, absolutely. You guys don't have any good beer over there. But when I was in Ireland a few years ago, I tried a Bulmers, and I thought that was awesome. So when Bruce and I are back over there, I'm sure we're going to hit up some Bulmers.
Well, if you are allowed gifts, I'll buy you this bottle of Irish whiskey. It's called Pogues whiskey. It'll blow your head off and you don't get a hangover.
Well, I like the sound of that, man.
And just as we come to the final question here, Conrad, I've heard that you're a big old school hip hop fan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Were you East Side or West Side? You Death Row?
No, listen, I'm from Alabama, man. I listen to absolutely everything. I like the underground stuff before it got really, really popular, and then, of course, I like all the mainstream stuff, but I can't pick necessarily one side or another. But I did like, everything that was super popular. I mean, one of the first albums I remember was The Chronic from Dr. Dre. I mean, that one sticks out like a sore thumb to me as maybe the first introduction. And then, of course, the Doggy Style album right behind it. Hip-hop really started to take over in the suburbs of America, in that 92, 93, 94 range. And that's when things really started to blow up for Notorious B.I.G. and Tupac and Death Row and all those guys. But in time, rap became a little more segmented, and we started to get some more Southern rap. And you could get, like, stuff from Atlanta or stuff from Florida or stuff from Tennessee. And, growing up in Alabama, everybody around here was listening to that. So the more off the beaten path 3-6 Mafia stuff was on my radar a lot sooner than it was maybe nationally. But then whenever I would, pick up magazines like The Source or something like that, I would hear about, Nas and Jay-Z, and I got introduced to all those. I was probably my first friend, in my circle. I was the first guy to be listening to Jay-Z, and, that worked out. And then it's weird how some of those acts just, sort of go away. Like DMX, while he's still out there, he's not nearly what he was, when he was dropping 2 platinum albums in the same year. But, to each his own.
Yeah, I think with DMX, it's I found the greatest hits of DMX CD in this old box of my stuff with all these old VHSs, and I started playing it, and there's a song, Rough Riders Anthem, and he must drop the M word like 40 times in the first 2 minutes, so you can't listen to that in public anymore.
Yeah, it's a weird deal. You have to be selective about who you sort of expose it to, but the people who get it, and it's cool to be able to talk about that with you today and talk about some wrestling. And I appreciate you taking the time to have me on today. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to meeting you and everybody on that side of the world, and you can pick up tickets right now at UKSTW. I know tickets are going fast. I think a few of those are already sold out, but Bruce Pritchard and I will be there in December. We're going to get our tour kicked off, I think, on either the 3rd or the 4th, and we're going to go to like the 9th or 10th. So it's going to be several stops all across Europe. We would love to meet each and every one of you at UKSTW.com.
And Christmas jumpers are mandatory.
I like it. I'm in.